My name is Mary Martha Staarman. I was born and raised in Cumberland, Maryland. That's the mountains of Maryland. And I went to St. Mary's School from first grade to 12th. After 8th grade, it went right into St. Mary's High School, which no longer exists, but anyway. And so after living there and at my home for 18 years, I joined the convent down here in Louisville, Kentucky. Well, I was 12 years with the Ursuline Sisters, and I actually wanted to be an airline stewardess. And in my junior year of high school is when I first thought about becoming a sister. We had at that time they would send priests or nuns around promoting vocations, and someone had just given a vocation talk, and I was sitting in, it was afterwards, I was sitting in a desk, and the sister had the door open, and right there was a bulletin board for the high school, and it was a big picture of joining the convent. So that's what started it. And then I was very close to one of the sisters, Sister Eugenia's, and I would help her after school doing things. And it just evolved little by little. I really didn't want to, and yet felt called to. So I ended up coming down here. And at that time that I entered, we would not ever go home again, just for the death, not during the illness, but at the death of your parents. And they could come, if you were out of town, they could come twice a year and stay three days to see you. But the idea was never to go back. So the only good thing about that was my sister. She said, "Oh boy, I get your room." She and I had the room together, so she was quite happy. She was only in the 6th grade, but she had a whole room to herself. So that was a happy part. And they had 2 schools. They had St. Mary's on one side of the tracks, St. Peter and Paul's on the other side. They had first grade through 12th also. And when my sister got to high school, they merged. And so St. Mary's had to go over to Ursuline Academy. In fact, now it's only 2,000 and something people, I think. The railroads were there. That's what brought people to Cumberland. And we had factories. The railroad took care of getting the produce to whichever place they were going, north or south, east or west. When the railroad stopped, the factories couldn't do anything, so they stopped. So it's now a retirement home, almost, retirement city. Closest I've been was Cincinnati. My father, well, we had relatives there. And before I entered the convent, my father wanted to show me all the relatives. And so we came down that far, and according to the map, I said, "Dad, we're not too far away from Louisville." No, he wasn't about to come over to Louisville. My father worked for the railroad, and so we had passes. So we came down by train, and we stayed over. I have no idea what hotel we stayed in, some hotel around here for the first night, and then the next day they brought me over here. I was also a friend, a very good friend of Sister Rosalie, and she taught at St. Elizabeth's at that time, and so she had us over for supper, and that I remember. The real promoting, yes, was I can see it to this day, this big poster out in that bulletin board, and I wasn't paying attention to school, to the teacher. I was saying, and I promised my parents, I said, "Don't you dare tell anybody." I said, "When I graduate, I will tell them." I guess I wasn't sure, I don't know. But my aunts and uncles knew, because that, instead of bringing a gift or something, they brought something that I needed. The Mother House sent out a list of things that you would need. If you could get them, fine. If not, they would give them to us when we got here. September 8th, 1955. We were called postulants when we entered. We wore a black dress, didn't have a veil, but a black dress and black shoes and black hose. In those days, black hose weren't the thing, but that's what we wore. And I'll never forget this. The first morning we had breakfast, they served us hot dogs. Well, I never heard of hot dogs at breakfast, and the first couple of days we could talk at meals. In fact, September to January, starting in January, you didn't speak at meals anymore. But before that, they kind of were just getting us used to it. Well, we were all, what do we do with a hot dog? There's no buns. We were matriculated over at the college, so we started our college in September. And in my class, the first one did not go to school. She was an elderly nun, Sister Cecilia Hayden. And then the second and third, they took classes, but they'd already had some classes before that. And then there was two of us who came straight out of high school, and then the rest of them were in seniors over at the academy. They came a year before they finished high school. So we had a group that was really different. We were teachers at that time. In '55, we all taught. I mean, there was a couple of sisters that worked in the kitchen, the majority, all of us. So all of us got degrees in education. That was the end result. It took 5 years, but I knew that if I entered the Ursuline Sisters, it was going to be a teacher. And I had wanted to be a teacher. Besides a stewardess, airline stewardess, I wanted to be a teacher. So this fell on, that was another thing that helped fall on the line. I was sure, I mean, I knew the Ursulines, and that's why I entered the Ursulines. But I knew there were other groups of sisters, and so I looked into some of them. I knew for sure I did not want to go a missionary. Forget that one. No bugs, no animals, no whatever. And I read the story of a married old sister, and it really grabbed me. But when I saw where she was going to China, and I said, no way, no way. So I stayed in education. Okay, the first year was postulancy. We did a full class. Second year, we were first year novices. That's when we wore the white veil. And we could not go out that year. We could not study. The third year, we could study part-time. This was postulancy and 2 white veils. Then on the fourth, we were going to make vows for 2 or 3 years. I can't remember what it was. And they were called temporary. Then at that point, it came out from the sisters' conventions all over the United States that they wanted us to stay home for 2 more years to get our college degree before we went out. Before, some sisters took 30 years to get their diploma because they were teaching and going to school only on Saturdays. But in our class, Janet Marie's class, she was a class before me, that was the first class that stayed home to finish their education. We made 3 vows, and then we made third year we made final vows. Yes. And that was for life. But the education part, we didn't finish, but we almost finished. The two of us that were straight out of high school. It took us another year or so we graduated. I entered in 55. We graduated from college in 62, 61, 62. No, 62. And 64 was the biggie. Off to Peru. I taught 3 years at St. George's. I was sent down to St. Joseph's in Columbia, South Carolina. Was there for 2 years. In my second year, on Ascension Thursday, never forget it, got this call from Mother Superior saying, "Sister, your new obedience is to go to Peru, South America." Well, at that point, what? Where is it? I didn't even know where it was. Because there's something that went before that. Our class got together one night, and they were having a good time, and they had just asked for people to volunteer to go to South America. So our class said only one person had Spanish. The rest of us did not know any Spanish. Well, we're not going to let's put our name in. At least the pot will be filled. Well, the next thing is I get the call saying I'm going to South America, Ascension Thursday. I'd taken geography, but I did not know where it was. So I said, somebody get me a map. Where am I going? and I knew of Sister Xavier and what's her name? The one who knew Spanish, Margaret. Can't think of her name right now. It'll come. They went 2 weeks before. They were going to teach the children in the Navy school English. Lee and I went 2 weeks after that. We went down. And we were to work in the barriada. First, we were going to take language school. Then we lived with the sisters who were working in the naval school. And, well, that was the first thing. That's what we're going to do. Anyway, that's how I was going. Okay, this was our first visit home. So I got to go, but you see, I was in Columbia, South Carolina. So by the time that school ended, I got up. It was towards the end of June when I could go, because we had other ceremonies and all like that. So I went home from our first home visit, and I came back on what I thought was a correct date. Well, when I get there, everybody is saying, when I get back to Louisville, they said, "Where were you? What happened? You're leaving tonight." They had packed my bags. I had no idea, but in those days, we didn't have hardly any clothes. Just your habit and your underwear. And so they put all that in a box, in a suitcase. And I left that night at 12 o'clock. I got in around 4 in the afternoon. So I came home and what I thought, and they all knew when I went. But somehow or other, they said, "Where were you?" We thought, and Lee said, we didn't know one another. She says, "I thought you weren't coming." Oh my goodness. Yeah, they were good old days. Our first plane ride, both Lee's and my first plane ride. I slept through the whole thing because of all that excitement being home, and I slept, and we had a terrible lightning storm. She said, "I was so scared, and there you are, sound asleep." That goes back to Ascension Thursday. So I called them afterwards. Well, my mother and father had no idea where Peru was either, but my father got a map, but they were not happy. Let's put it that way. You sure you can't change it? You sure you can't do something different? I said, I don't think so. I said, I told the superior I did not speak Spanish. Oh, everybody down there speaks English. Well, everybody in where they stayed, everybody did speak English. Where we were going to work, nobody spoke English. And even with the first two sisters, they were with people who all spoke English, and they were supposed to be teaching these children English, but all the teachers spoke English. Most everybody that they were around spoke English. It was just us. We went to language school, 4 months. It didn't work. I mean, 3 of us nuns, Lee, myself, and 1 Mercy sister. And the rest were all priests. Must have been about 15. And we had Saturday classes till 12 o'clock. After 12 o'clock, you could go. Well, they went out, went to the bars, went to sports, all this kind of thing, where they picked that up so much faster than we stayed in a house out there that the people that we rented the house from for those 4 months, they came in on the weekends, so we had to be out. So we went straight to where our sisters were. Well, you didn't learn any Spanish there because they all spoke English. So we picked it up really from the people, from the kids. And that's really what really pushed you over the hump. But it took me 2 years before I could really, we taught all day in Spanish, but it took me about 2 years before I really would talk to adults, because I was working on a child's level, 1st grade. And they were the words I knew. And I think I've told you all before that we had a teacher who told us one day that we should be careful and not use the Spanish that we were using because it was street language. And so, but we picked it up from them. That's what they were speaking, and that's, as a little excerpt, when I got back to the States and I was working with children and parents, the teachers would I'd be an intermediary between the teacher and the parent. And the teacher would say, you know, he really disrespects me. He's using these words that should not be used in a classroom. I said, let me tell you something. I went through this myself, so I can tell you it's not disrespectful. You're trying to learn a language, and you think that they're speaking okay. You don't know that they're not speaking okay. So I help many teachers through my working through it myself. But the beds that we were in, that's one of the things I remember. We had no bed the first night. I can't remember what we slept on, but there was no bed. The bed came the next day. Lee and I thought we were working with the Maryknoll fathers. Well, they're the ones, they were in charge of getting sisters for these different places, but then they left. I mean, they left you on your own. Well, we didn't have a refrigerator. We finally got one of those. No hot water and white habits. See, we're not a missionary community, and I don't care how long you want to say it, or just because we were there, it's not a missionary. You're not an international community. But we were the superiors were under the understanding that this was a warm climate, we're close to the equator, and that black serge wasn't going to work. So they gave us a white polyester habit and a white veil. And supposedly, but when we got there, it was midwinter. We got there in July. It was winter. We were freezing. No one down there has heating system. It's just people are used to it. So, Margaret, it's on the tip of my tongue, that other sister, but anyway, she went down to Sears in the middle of Lima and got us flannel pajamas, and we wore those under our habit to keep us warm. And we said the first person that comes down, or when they send a trunk down, put our black habits in there. Well, then you get to summer, and you wear the white habit then, but the ground is so sandy, the bottom of your habit was always dirty. So you had to put them you had to boil water, put them in, not in a tub, we had no tubs, but this big sink, and we put it in there and soak it, rub it. We had two habits. So while one was drying, the other one you were wearing. But our first thing was, could we put that hem up a bit more? You know, cut the bottom off and do it that way. We did that for a while, and then we decided to dye it gray. But whoever did it, it was at a company we sent to, all the dirty spots that hadn't come out were dark gray, and the rest of it was light gray, so it was spotty all over. So, and also they were shorter. The gray ones were shorter, so you didn't have to wash them as often. But those white ones that were long were really dirty. We were down there for 5 years. We didn't figure anybody would come, and so we just did it. Her name is Mother Xavier. She was from Pittsburgh. She was a Pittsburgh Ursuline, and she joined us, and that group joined us. And but she was very. This was the first time we come out of cloister, practically speaking, because when we were here in the States at the time that we left, we couldn't go to the grocery store. So people went and did the grocery shopping for us. So this was our first time really out. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to go to a market. We went. And it was just a whole new ball game. So, but Mother Xavier was always leery of giving us permission, since it was our first time out, and how they would react up here. Well, we got to the point, the two of us anyway, said, this is what we're going to do. You want to do it? Fine. So that's how it happened, nicely. It was all nice. We did not have phones. So you didn't do anything on the phone at that time. Our first year is 64, 65. Here we are again, we're all educators. What do? We have 4 rooms that were given to us to do what we wanted. The only thing we knew was education, so we started a school. The first year it was just Lee and I. We took first grade. We had a papal volunteer, she did kindergarten. And Lee and I had first grade. And that went on I taught there 2 years. And then we got some Peruvian teachers. And then I became a catechist. And in those days, and I think you still can, Catholic faith was the faith of the country. Right next door to us was a public school. And so I could go in there and teach catechism, which I did. And into our own. Well, our own teachers pretty much did their own. But so I was in charge of First Communion and Confirmation. Then, and I was also in charge of the clinic. We had a clinic down there where a Peruvian doctor came, and we asked for medicines from up here. and they sent a trunk full of medicines down. I didn't know what they were for. He didn't know what they were for in English, so I knew a nurse, a sister of think of what, Precious Blood, and she was a nurse, and so she promised me she'd come out a couple Sundays, and we'd go through and she'd put signs on the cupboard doors or cupboard shelves, and I know what the medicine was and what it was for, and I could, if he needed something for something, whatever, I could go in there and pick it off the shelf. I also took, she was also in charge of anybody who wanted to learn, not nursing, but an aide. So I took that course. So at least I know something about a clinic, which I knew nothing. I mean, I'm a teacher. I don't know what this is. So I was doing those two things. The doctor came, I think, twice a week. We were always looking for a priest because every Sunday we'd have to go out and get a priest for Mass since we had no resident. And one week we get the priest from the language school, and one week we get Spanish priest. And so the kids used to say, when I'd take off, I brought Lee out, she didn't drive at that time, brought Lee out, and then I went back to get the priest. And the gang of boys would be around. Sister, who are you going to bring this time, the Spanish or the English? I said, Spanish. Oh, we're not going to confession this week, we'll go next week. And he doesn't know what we're saying. So that was another one of my duties, was to pick up these priests. A priest from Worcester, Massachusetts. He was working in Sequani, that's up in the mountains, and he felt sorry for us. So he came as resident. He stayed there. And so then my job, because I had trained some catechists, my job went from that to social work. And in 1970, 69, 70, I took a class up in Ecuador, study up in Ecuador for 6 months on how the English-speaking priest should be working in this country. We're not supposed to bring our ideas down, and so they filled us with how the Peruvian, well, it was a Latin American church, should be working. So for 6 months I was there in Ecuador, and when I came back, that's when I became the social worker. As Father had thought, if we sent you away for this, now put it to practice. So I started working with a small group, small communities. We had 10,000 people, and they in a 10-block area. So we divided them up in blocks and worked with them. Some of them worked, some of them still working today, so it was good. Vatican II came out. Then the bishops of Latin America got together and they put out their own little booklet about Vatican II. And this was worded in very simple language. It's a book only about this big. And during the week, or every 2 weeks, I think, we had meetings and we discussed that book chapter by chapter. We used it. The book was already worn out practically when I brought it back, but it's no good up here. But anyway, that's what it was. Then we had Gustavo Gutierrez with the Liberation Theology. So these two meshed, and we would work, as I said, every 2 weeks or so. We meet together, priests from different areas and sisters, and we discuss that. Then we implement it in in our case, we had about 10 blocks, or maybe a little less, in which we went through this same book, but in a much more reduced to them. So, but the Peruvian priest had found, well, they saw it happening, that we came down from the United States and did. I'm not sure we would have started a school if we had known all this before. May have not, I don't know. But they say we try to make Peru just like the United States, and that ain't working. We have to work with the people we're working with, who are very poor, come from the mountains, and we have to adapt to them, not they're adapting to us. It wasn't working, and we were pushing something that really wasn't working. Our coming down and trying to get them, or other, you're making them a little American community, and they didn't want that. We want Peruvians to stay Peruvians, and in that way. We did community-based communities. And the things that I said, those two books meshed together, plus our working together as a group every 2 weeks or so, then we translate into that block. And I know in one of our blocks, the idea was action. There should be, we're not just learning religion, we're also putting it to work. And I know in this one, nobody had water, but this one area did not have water, and their well wasn't as close as ours was. Well, ours wasn't too close, but anyway, we decided in that small group, once a week we'd go down, the women would go down to the mayor's office and tell them what we needed, like a protest, and the women would go. And they did this for a couple months until finally I think he was tired of hearing from them. So he said, we'll do this. So they did, and they got water. It took a couple of years. I mean, it just didn't happen overnight. But it did happen. And I got to be the godmother of the water when they blessed the water. When they started it up, Father blessed the water, and I was supposed to be the godmother. It was nice. I was there with them every week at these meetings, and I was the one that transported half of them down there. At that time, we had a big car, and so we get quite a few ladies in there, at least 10. We got ours before theirs. The water came through because we had to carry water. Well, that didn't last too long. We learned a little system here. These little boys need some money, and so they put that rod on their back with the 2 buckets of water, bring it up to our house, which is two blocks away. And we dumped it in our tub. And we didn't get baths in those days. We got sponge baths. But every other Saturday, I would go down to the IHM sisters in Callao and ask if I could have a shower. And all the IHMs had the best down there. They worked with the very rich, and so they had a really nice convent, really good water. And so with my towel and washcloth, I traiped down there and got my shower, because you couldn't get one. That was where we stored our water. We were still not drinking water at that time. I guess we were I guess we were. And we boiled the water, and then we had something that neutralizes it. Can't remember what it's called. Anyway, that's what you had to go to before you could drink the water. But it had to be boiled, definitely. We had no electricity, no water. When we bought a house out there, which was well constructed, and we knew the family, and they wanted to leave and go higher up. So after 1, 2, 3, 4. We lived 4 years with his sisters, and then we got the house out there, but had no water or electricity. When we first went there, most of the houses were made of straw. They had these big straw mats that they would buy, 4 of them, and then some of them had something on the roof and some of them didn't. Some of that might just be open air. And then they began to buy bricks, not like a load of them, maybe 6 or 10. They'd start that, and then they added. When I left, I'd say maybe half the people had 1/4 of a house done. The rest were still living in, we call them chosas. And so you could see the progress there. They got streets. Before it was all dirt road. It was the river went right beside us, and so what we understand is all that land where these people were, ourselves, was all a river, and somehow or other they got it streamed over to one area and built up so that they could use that for land. A shining path. That came right after it was coming when I left. There was a lot of riots going on. I mean, we think we have riots here, forget that one. They have riots, and the whole town is out, especially where we were working, because all that was very poor people. So in order to get their rights, they would protest. And we would go to a lot of the protests and be a part of it. I think somewhere in one of these times that there were protests, they used water. That's what they used in Peru. They used tear gas, was one way of getting you disbanded. Or they had this water, and they could shoot it out where it would really knock you down. So I know one of them that I was in, 2 or 3 of them really, but one I remember, the tear bombs going off and just running to get someplace that had an open area that I could get in. I went in somebody's house. It opened and I went in. She understood, the lady understood, and she said, "You can stay here for a few minutes." One time I was running and I fell, and 2 men, they just came along and just picked me up and went on. That's why I've had my fill of protests now. I've done all that. I left Peru in April of 78, 15 years. When we were first sent down there, we were given the option. You had to stay 5 years. After that, you can up for another 5. I upped for 3 times. Then I said, if I'm going to get a job back home, I got to go now. My parents were getting elderly, so I thought this was the time to go. So when I came back to the States, I told them that I would like to keep up my Spanish. I'd like to continue in that type of work. So I put out feelers in 5 or 6 dioceses. And I tried to get one close to home, so I'd been away so much. So I thought, it so happened that one of the places that I had chosen was Reading, Pennsylvania. So I went to a month of getting, they give courses to help a missionary get back into the stateside. So that was up in New York. So I took a month up there, and then came home in April, took that month of July, and started working the 1st of September. And my job there was social work. And we had a place there called Kennedy House. And we had a secretary, and I had a desk there, and we worked with they were mostly Puerto Ricans. So worked with the Puerto Ricans, and then I was maybe 2 years into that, and we discovered mushroom farms, and that belonging to the parish. So on Saturday night, we had Mass out in a little chapel for the Mexicans. And so every Saturday night, we'd go out there, and sometimes we'd have, the people would bring snacks, not snacks, they don't bring snacks, they bring rice and beans. And so, and we'd have something after Mass. But my job was to enter the homes, get to know the people, and let the people know that we were there to help them. And I did that 4 years, till 78, 82, 81. It was 81. And a new pastor took over, and he wanted to bring his own nuns in. So the usual, the one could go where 3 could come in. So that's what happened. So I had to look for another job, and that's when I went to Illinois, and I worked with the Jesuits, and they did a lot of work in the tomato farms for Heinz's, which was on the other side. It's Iowa, but there's only a bridge across the Mississippi, so we were on one side. We did have Mass, and we did work a little with the people on Illinois side, but we did most of our work at the tomato farms. I often wonder about that, because these people were out there in the hot sun. There was no shade whatsoever for those tomato plants. They had to be there all day, and then here we walk in at night, oh, all refreshed. We're going to do a movie tonight. Well, they're all half asleep. I was only there a year, and I was just getting to know the people. In a year, you don't get much done. But I visited homes, and we did catechetical work out on the farms, and people who had problems with paperwork, we learned where the Jesuits knew those places. I didn't even know, never got to really learn. And after a year, it was one night, Mother called and said, "Your father has just lost it. He's going to come home, and I can't do this by myself." So I called the superior and see if there's a possibility of going there and helping out. And it was okay with them. So I came back to Cumberland, and Dad had Alzheimer's. And the first week I was there, it was around Thanksgiving, I got a call from the principal at the school. "I know you're home for your dad. Is there any possibility you'd like to take on teaching? I just lost a teacher in first grade." Well, that was my grade. So I thought it over, and I said, sure, I could do that during the day and be home at 3 o'clock or 3:30 and do the preparation and all, instead of doing it at school, doing it at home. So it worked out. And so I also got my health insurance, and I got a salary. So it worked out very nice. It worked out at home. I did that for 2 years. Then Dad passed away, and I started again sending out resumes, because I didn't want to stay in the teaching. I wanted to get back with the Spanish. So my brother had just moved to Downingtown. And so this place was in Westchester, which is like a half an hour distance. So I told my mother, I said, "I'll take you up. You can stay with your son, and I'll go over there and do what I have to do for the weekend." And so that's what I did, and it really looked positive. I did visit other places, but that looked really positive. And so I said I would take it. The priest was an elderly priest. He was next to retirement. I was in these kind of clothes. The IHM sisters were there in full habit. So I did have a little worry about tension there, and I said, where will I live? And the pastor said, in my convent, of course. And so he talked to the superior, and she told me that I could, I'd be welcome, and that I could be participating in everything except for their meetings. And I said, that's fine, I don't need another meeting. So I took on that job and stayed for 30 years. 30 years. And I went through 5 pastors. The beginning was you try to know the people and go out. And that's what I did for the first 1 or 2 years. And then somebody came one day to the rectory. I happened to be there. And he says, I have to talk to a priest right away. I said, well, I'll see if I can find one that speaks Spanish. And there was only one there. So anyway, he came down and he talked to him. And the man, his wife had just lost a child. So I got to know that family because we helped them out with the burial and things like that. Well, she got pregnant soon after. Would I help? So she was afraid of losing another child. So yeah, I'll help. And that started my ministry with the babies. From her, I would take her to all her appointments that she had. Made sure she got there. Well, then she passed the word to her relative. And so somebody asked me, would I help her? She said, I don't have any way of getting to my appointments. Okay, so I take on another one. So that's out by word of mouth. I never said that I was doing this or anything, word of mouth. And I helped 300 plus babies into the world. This is Westchester. There's Hispanic people there, and they're not being noticed, they're not being taken care of. So I got in on as many groups as I possibly could. So that when I walked in, people would know there's the Hispanic. The Hispanic might not be there, but they all knew who I was, little by little. In 30 years, you can imagine. It took a while. It didn't all happen at once. So I was called in to help out with the plans they were making for education. I was a part of the board, not the real board, but religious board for the hospital. So I got in on all that. And there was a civic association, which I participated in because we were asking for money from them. The church with the Hispanic is the one that was asking for the money. I got to be president of that for a couple of years. You ask for something, you have to give something. So Westchester knew me. There was no doubt about it. So when I walk in, everybody knew, as I said before, that that was the Hispanic representation there at that meeting. I was a bit political. Not a bit, a good bit political. My mother had started the Democratic Club in Cumberland, Maryland, she and another lady. So I've always been under that umbrella. But the babies became, that's what everybody knows me by, because that was a unique way of ministry, a unique ministry. But I also, at the same time, worked fingers out into everything in the Westchester area. So when I left, The priest said, "How do you know all these people?" He was new. I said, "Well, it took me a while." I said, "But this is what happened." And I said, "I have to accept their appreciation of what I've done and what I can do, what I have been able to do." And so that's, until 5 years ago, that was my life. I was at the wedding of some of my babies. In fact, I got an invitation for July for one of them. I felt that I knew the community when I left, pretty much every Hispanic. We had a Protestant church there for the Hispanics, which was growing, but people who had known me before they skipped out, and there was some reason for that. I mean, it's not entirely their fault. But they always came back and greeted me as if I was still a part of their lives, and still was invited to baptisms, weddings, funerals, and that's what I have missed most down here. It took me so long to do something where I became a part of something that I can't start over at this age. I just can't do it. Besides, I feel like working at the clinic, which I do now since I came down here, was to, it's still, I'm keeping up the language, I'm keeping up, it's not the same kind of relationship, but I think that's what they need. They need help there. I remember that was another experience I had when I was in Peru. I got hepatitis. I ate everything on the streets and deserved it. But Lee told me the reason why I got it was I didn't drink enough beer. I was in the hospital and people were over top. This is my first couple of years there. Over top of me. I had no idea what they were saying, what was going on. I said, if I ever get out of here, and I ever had the chance, and that's what I did. I helped the people through the hospital system. That was a horrible. And I can just imagine this poor young women, 19, 20, having a baby, their mother's usually with them. And so I took on that role. And many of them would say to the baby when they were born, "Now you have a grandmother down in Mexico, but this is your grandmother here. This is Abuelita." But here I don't get all that, but I feel that I'm giving a good part I can give now. 86, pretty good. The two things that I experienced, I'm finding it here. And down there at the clinic, you know, they look at the doctor. So, and I know it's volunteer, but I feel obligated to be there the days I've promised to be there. Because if I'm not, no one's there. And either the doctor does something, I don't know what he does or what they do. When I was away these 3 weeks, I tried to get somebody to take my place, and I think they did while I was gone. The health clinic serves only those with no insurance. I'd say you lost your job, and between that job and another one down the road, you don't have any insurance. We will take people like that. But the Hispanics, the majority, do not have health insurance because they can't get it. They don't have a Social Security number. So we really, I would say 80%, 85% are Hispanic from all different parts. All Central America, Cuba, Puerto Rico. Puerto Ricans have no reason for not having insurance, so we have to be very careful why they're coming in. you can't really trace it, and they can give you any number on a Social Security card if they want to, but there's no reason. They're citizens. So, and babies, even though they don't have a Social Security, if they're born here, they get a Social Security number, and they can be treated. We have very few babies that ever come in. Well, there's no reason, because they get that no matter who their parents are. They're citizens. We don't take care of pregnant women, which that is what I really miss doing. But we have to limit. It's all volunteer. Nurses, doctors, and we don't have doctors that do GYN. None of them come in that do that. So we don't want to entrust ladies to a practical general practice. So we have clinics for diabetes. I mean, within the clinic, one day a month, they bring them together and give them medicine and things that they need things to prick your finger and that type of thing. We have an orthopedic clinic in which people who have bad breaks or something. We used to have, before the pandemic, we had about 5 clinics. Now we only have the 2. We have a dentist now. They only come, I think, 1 Saturday a month. It's very difficult to get dentists. So we keep them at one Saturday. But of course the list is forever. But that's the main general practicing is exactly this. We have doctors, I'm not exactly sure how many we have, but there must be at least 20. And we have nurses. We're getting new nurses now, just lately. I would say we have about 20 nurses. And the interpreters, we have quite a few. And nurse practitioners we have. We served last month, I just saw the statistics go up. We served 220 people the month of March. Well, first of all, the Hispanic has made a big impact on my life. Actually, I think I found my vocation in Peru. I think I really knew why I entered the convent. Before, I'm not sure, but I really felt it down there. And that's why I wanted to keep on when I came back to the States. I didn't want to lose it because I didn't want to lose that contact between the Hispanic and myself. I didn't want to lose the language that I had tried so hard for. It's given me a new, through the eyes of the Hispanic, has given me a new look at my life, my vocation, my prayer life. I've just felt that I owe it all to them. And I think that's the bottom line. It's somehow or other their culture has, I've meshed the 2 cultures together, I think, pretty good. And I feel good when I'm in an atmosphere where there are Hispanics. And it just makes me realize how much I've learned and how much I've grown in this atmosphere. I think just being in the midst of the Hispanics and being able to help them in the small ways that you can, And I become a great devotee of St. Angela. As somebody said one time in one of the meetings, we never knew who Angela was when we first entered the convent. We weren't told about her. It's just to celebrate her feast day. And I think that's what she did. She walked around, she visited homes, she helped people do things that they probably never would have done if she hadn't encouraged. So I feel that in that sense, I am fulfilling my charism, and I'm hoping that I shine forth with some of that charism to the outside world, people whom I meet.